My name is Morgan Bartley, and my presentation will be on Marsha P. Johnson. Marsha P. Johnson was born Malcolm Michaels Jr. on August 24th, 1945, in Elizabeth, New Jersey. Johnson experienced a difficult childhood due to her Christian upbringing. She engaged in cross-dressing behavior in an early age, but was quickly reprimanded. Johnson moved to Greenwich Village in New York City after graduating from high school. In New York, Marsha struggled to make ends meet. She was homeless and prostituted herself, and she found joy as a drag queen amidst the nightlife of Christopher Street. She quickly became a prominent fixture in the LGBTQ community, serving as a drag mother by helping homeless and struggling LGBTQ youth and touring the world as a successful drag queen with the Hot Peaches. As stated by Marsha P. Johnson in her early life, quote, I was no one, nobody, from Nowheresville until I became a drag queen. That's what made me in New York. That's what made me in New Jersey. That's what made me in the world. An eccentric woman known for her outlandish hats and glamorous jewelry, she was fearless and bold. Despite her difficulties with mental illness and numerous police encounters, whenever she was asked what the P in her name stood for, and when people pried her about her gender or sexuality, she quit back with, pay it no mind. Her forthright nature and enduring strength led her to speak out against injustices. Another thing stated by Marsha is, I may be crazy, but that don't make me wrong. On June 28, 1969, at the Stonewall Inn on Christopher Street, the hub of the New York City gay community in the 1960s, things turned violent after a few LGBTQ people were arrested on questionable charges, handcuffed, and very publicly forced into police cars on the streets of New York City. The LGBTQ community was fed up with being targeted by the police, and seeing these public arrests incited rioting that spilled over into the neighboring streets and lasted several days. These events have been collectively described as a riot, a rebellion, a protest, and an uprising. Whatever the label, this was certainly a watershed moment in LGBTQ history. Many eyewitnesses identified Marsha as one of the main instigators of the uprising, and thus some have recognized her as the vanguard of the gay liberation movement in the United States. The Stonewall Uprising was an awakening for an entire generation of LGBTQ activists. Soon, Marsha was attending rallies, sit-ins, and meetings of newly formed Gay Liberation Front. She was excited about the work, but frustrated and questioned where transgender people would fit in. As an African American trans woman, Johnson was consistently been overlooked, both as a participant in the Stonewall Uprising and more generally LGBTQ activism. As the broader gay and lesbian movement shifted toward leadership from white cisgender men and women, trans people of color were swept into the outskirts of the movement. Despite this, following events in Stonewall, in 1970, Johnson and her friend Silvio Rivera co-founded the Street Transvestite Action Revolutionaries, STAR, and they became fixtures in the community, especially in their commitment to helping homeless transgender youth. STAR provided services, thus including shelter. The first was a trailer truck to homeless LGBTQ people in New York City, Chicago, California, and England for a few years in the early 1970s, but eventually was disbanded. As they thought this was a abandoned trailer truck, they would return nightly after doing whatever needed to be done to obtain funds to feed the young youth of the streets in the LGBTQ community. They would return one night to find that the truck wasn't actually abandoned and had been moved along with the youth in the rear of the truck. In 1975, artist Andy Warhol crossed paths with Marsha and photographed her for his Ladies and Gentlemen series. When a Warhol screen print of Marsha went on display in a Greenwich Village store. Marsha took some friends to see it. The store owners called her riffraff and threw her out. Marsha's whole life seemed to be a balance between popularity and exclusion. Throughout Greenwich Village, she was known as Saint Marsha. Locals admired her ability to truly be herself. Marsha had a reputation for being generous and kind. She gave people clothes and food, even though she had little of her own. And although despite her popularity, Marsha also lived a life of poverty and danger. She was arrested over 100 times. She believed no one should hustle or live on the streets. But she knew no other way to survive. In 1990, Marsha contracted AIDS. She spoke publicly about it and told people she hoped they would not be afraid of those who had the disease. Sadly, at the age of 46, on July 6th of 1992, Johnson's body was found in the Hudson River off the West Village piers. The police ruled she had committed suicide despite claims from her friends and other members of the local community that she was not suicidal. And 25 years later, a crime victim advocate of New York City Anti-Violence Project reopened the case. The case still remains open today with no conclusion.